What's up, guys? Doing another video, obviously. This topic, though, I have to admit I didn't pick for myself. This was actually a suggestion. I have to thank McWild1234 for this one. Basically asked me, sorry, my chair's messed up. He basically asked me what I thought about public schools and education in America in general. My thoughts of the whole thing. I have to admit that I haven't totally made up my mind on education, but we got my opinions. It's one thing I'll say, and I'm pretty sure everyone will agree with me when it comes to me in this channel. I got my opinion. I will definitely say that if anybody else has their own thoughts, and if they think there's any holes in the logic that I present, or if they want to add on to whatever I say here, as always, feel free. You know I'm open to new ideas, comments, videos, whatever. Only thing I'm not open to is assholes. It's not changed. So, here goes. I'm pretty sure many of us will agree that education in this country sucks. Sucks nuts. And it's a shame when you consider that they keep saying how great this country is, and yet you got kids, adults, college students who barely know geography. In fact, let me give you an idea of how messed up the education is in this country. It's so messed up that people in other countries know that the education in this country is effed up. They expect it. I'll never forget this. I was coming home from work. This was a couple of years ago. Coming home from work on the train, and I bumped into an elderly gentleman from another country. And he needed help getting to the train, and so I decided to take it upon myself to guide him to the train, and later on guide him to the right spot. And we struck up a conversation. And the guy was very intelligent, very, very intelligent. Very worldly. I enjoyed talking to him immensely that day. And he was talking to me, and he was looking at me rather curiously during the train trip. And finally, he's like, "Are you American?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I work here." And he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm not making this up. He's like, "You realize?" I'm sure I know where I was born. He said, "Because you seem a lot more intelligent than the Americans I'm accustomed. So I come here every year to teach the teachers of your country, and they aren't with it." Think about that for a moment. And something else that cracked me up, he goes, "By the way, can you guess where I'm from?" I went, "Huh?" He says, "Can you just guess where I'm from?" So I looked at him for a moment, and I tried to, I concentrated on the way his accent. I said, I know you're definitely, he said, "You're definitely East European. I'm thinking you're Romanian, but I could be wrong." And his eyes just lit up. Exactly. You're one of the very few that can actually guess what country I'm from. And I was like, well, I didn't really think it's a big deal. He says, "This is a problem. Americans don't pay attention because they're taught not to pay attention." And he then went on and on about the differences between how they're taught in Romania and how they're taught here. And I don't remember everything, but there were a lot of differences, like how they try to get the kids to come up with answers on their own rather than force feed it down their throats, and get them to pay more attention to their surroundings and to the people in front of them. But the thing I took from that encounter was the fact that this man had an expectation that Americans are generally stupid. And this was a guy who taught American teachers. He came here every year in like a teaching seminar with other American teachers. He's a Romanian one going to an American one, and he did not think much of them. That should give you pause. Now I know some idiot somewhere, "Fuck Romania, you always make us put down our country, America," but come on. You need to think for a moment. For every flag-waving idiot who might be listening to this right now, you should really think about the fact that the rest of the world thinks you are morons. And the sad thing is, if you try to defend yourself, you just show yourself to be one. If I was to ask you who the president of Mexico is right now, you wouldn't be able to answer the question without looking it up. The people in Europe or people in other countries can tell you who the names of leaders of other countries are, because they're smart enough to know that getting an idea of the politics going on in other countries might be a good idea in case they do something that affects the rest of the world. I'm going off topic though. We're supposed to focus primarily on the education, not the intelligent levels of Americans. I think the problem with education in this country, many people will blame it on the fact that it's government run. And I am not going to say that's bad logic, because, well, quite frankly, considering that this government is corrupt and really doesn't give two shits about its citizens anyway, it stands to reason that their education system won't be up to standard. In fact, as K. Biomex so eloquently put it in one of his videos, the purpose of public education is to dumb down the public, not to brighten them up. You can look at the way they teach kids. They don't really teach them. It's all just rote memorization, and they're not really taught to engage the mind. They're more taught to accept authority. Here are the facts. Write them down. Pass the test. Do what the fuck I say. If you don't, you're in trouble. And if you happen to be going into public education systems in more urban areas, then the school acts more like a prison than it does a place of learning. It gets even worse when you go into high school, because there's a heavier emphasis on fitting in and being with the right crowd than engaging the mind. Your teenage years are very important, as that's when you start beginning to learn your analytical skills and start learning how to put two and two together, a lot more than when you were younger. These should be the years when teenagers are taught the skills that they need to be able to make their own choices and to engage their brains. And while people will say that teachers aren't the ones that are dumbing down the kids by, instead of working about social cliques and things like that, our culture helps to reinforce that. Whenever we see shows on teenagers or high school and things like that, they're mostly focused on all the fluff and all the misery that kids usually go through when they go to high school. But they don't really focus that much on what kids should be doing in high school, which is learning and having teachers that teach them to learn things. Now, at this point, you guys might be wondering, what do I mean by learning things? Well, there's a difference between putting a book in front of a kid and said, read this chapter, there'll be a test on a Friday, and saying, now this book is saying this. Do you guys can come up with any reasons why it's this way? Well, let's find out. Science is good at that, because they make the kids actually have to do experiments so they can see for themselves how the theories work. But you can do the same thing with history by asking them, well, why do you think such and such person was motivated to do such and such a thing? Why do you think that people would think this? Hell, you can go a step further like some of my history teachers used to do. Why do you think it is that the history book says this, but if we go a little bit further, there's something else that went on behind the scenes? This is what kids need. But we're not getting it, and there's a damn good reason for it. Any government that wants to have total power over its people will not want a completely educated group. It cannot have an educated group of citizens, because sooner or later, that means that if there's any corruption or bullshit going on, the citizens will patch them on it. It takes intelligence and observation to do that, and this is not something that schools get. So what are the alternatives? People will then, of course, go that, well, get it out of the hands of government. Well, that's not really solving the problem, because I'm a product of private school, and I can tell you they're not much better. The problem is the culture itself. This is not a culture that celebrates intelligence or education. All it celebrates is materialism, consumerism, grabbing as much money as you possibly can, and always being on top. Everything here is situated more on just instant pleasure and materialism. Things that engage the mind are not respected in this country. This is the primary reason why education sucks. If you have a culture that doesn't put a heavy emphasis on it, it stands to reason that people won't do much for it. So, again, what are alternatives? Well, we have to hold these schools accountable, but if, for one thing, if it's public school and if it's government running it, that means you need to go hold the government accountable and make them do more to educate kids. But you also have to do something to completely change around the culture, and that's not going to be an easy thing to do. Nerds, geeks, and other terms that they use for intelligent people is still being widely used to this day, and even though people like me now take it as a badge of honor, the fact remains that if you happen to be someone intelligent, it's a negative stigma. That needs to be the first step. You need to remove that stigma first if you're going to be able to do anything to fix education. Then you got to worry about the system itself. Do I agree that we should have a government running the system? No. However, if you believe that government should be solving certain problems, see, this is where things get a little bit complicated, and I think I'm probably, since I'm at the 10-minute mark, yeah, I'm going to split this into 2 parts. I gave you some of my thoughts on what I think education is. Next part, I'll go into alternatives and things like that. So, see you in the next part.